Former Attorney General Pam Bondi talks to congressional lawmakers about the Jeffrey Epstein files. Bondi appeared today in closed session before the House Oversight Committee.
And what you're going to hear in that interview and what she's saying here in her words and remarks is that it was Todd Blanch, the current acting AG, that was leading the Epstein investigation. And quite frankly, all of the mistakes that we saw, the redactions, not protecting survivors, she continues to push that back onto the acting AG.
Pam Bondi is not a victim. She is not a bystander. She is the Attorney General who stood behind a podium, held up a binder, and told the world the Epstein client list was sitting right there on her desk. And now, months later, behind closed doors, with no cameras, no oath on record for the public to see, she's singing a very different tune. She's pointing fingers. She's throwing subordinates under the bus, and every single answer she gives raises one question louder than the last. What exactly is Pam Bondi trying to bury, and how much longer can she keep burying it?
What did you ask her? What did she say?
Well, first of all, on a human level, I wished her well in her recovery from cancer. What we wanted here was just answers to help the survivors. And what she told us is that Todd Blanch was really managing the whole thing. So we need to ask Todd Blanch questions. She also told us, surprisingly, that the FBI it scrubbed a lot of the documents or held a lot of the documents before they got to the Justice Department. That means that we need to ask Patel, why were those documents redacted or what documents were missing? And then finally, when pressed on whether some of the individuals should be prosecuted, whether they should be investigated, she deferred to Jay Clayton, who's the U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York. And so we need to ask him, what is going to happen to the people who raped or abused or trafficked the victims?
Did she have anything to say about what kinds of documents, what sort of information the FBI withheld from DOJ?
She did not. But what was very surprising is she said that some of the documents were withheld by the FBI. As you know, Casey, because you've been covering this for a long time, in March of 2025, the FBI first scrubbed those documents. And the law that Thomas Massie and I passed, the Epstein Transparency Act, required all of the documents to be released, particularly the survivors' statements to the FBI in 302 forms where they name names. It turns out that when the Justice Department got those documents from the FBI, a lot of had already been redacted or missing. And so some of the answers that we need are with the FBI director.
Let's start with what actually happened. Bondi sat for a closed-door interview with the House Oversight Committee. Behind closed doors, meaning no live footage, no public transcript yet, just members of Congress walking out afterward and telling reporters what they heard. And what they heard should terrify anyone who thought this case was being handled honestly. Bondi's defense, in her own words, was that Acting Attorney General Todd Blanch was, quote, managing the entire investigation. Let that sink in. The woman who publicly promised transparency, who promised a client list, who promised accountability, is now saying it wasn't her. It was Blanch, Donald Trump's former personal lawyer, the same Todd Blanch who is now running the Justice Department. Bondi handed him the wheel and is now trying to walk away from the crash. But it doesn't stop there. She also told the committee, and this is the part reportedly setting off alarm bells inside oversight, that the FBI scrubbed documents before they even reached the Justice Department. Survivor statements. 302 forms. The exact documents where survivors named their abusers by name. Missing. Redacted. Gone. Before Bondi's own department ever got a clean look at them. So now we have three different people all pointing at each other. Bondi says it was Blanch's operation. Blanch answers to nobody who's testified yet. Patel's FBI reportedly held back or redacted the documents before DOJ ever saw them. And when lawmakers pushed Bondi on whether anyone should actually be prosecuted, she punted again, this time to US. Attorney Jay Clayton in the Southern District of New York. 3 names, 0 accountability. And Bondi, sitting in the middle of all of it, somehow always one step removed from the decision that actually mattered.
Outside of the room, a group of women who survived abuse by Jeffrey Epstein called on Bondi to provide the public with more information, including why the Justice Department says there's no need for any further investigation of Epstein or his alleged accomplices.
The Department of Justice is simultaneously telling the American people that there are no additional investigative leads worth pursuing. We can see with our own eyes when we look at the Epstein files that this is not true. These files contain leads, names, connections, friendships, patterns, witnesses, travel records, financial relationships, and institutional failures. In any other sex trafficking case of this magnitude, those leads would be aggressively pursued. But in this case, they have not been. And as citizens of this country, we should all be asking why.
Casey, as you know, this was a much anticipated appearance by Bondi because she has faced a torrent of criticism for her handling of all things Epstein, from her promise to release a client list that DOJ eventually said didn't exist, to the release of the Epstein files that failed to redact victim names and other sensitive information. Now, Democrats say behind closed doors, she tried to place a lot of the blame for these mistakes on the now acting Attorney General Todd Blanch. Let's take a listen.
It is clear in just this part of the interview that she continues to push all of the investigation and the blame on acting AG Todd Blanch. She said, and I quote, "Acting AG Blanch was managing the entire investigation," end quote. And what you're going to hear in that interview, and what she's saying here in her words and remarks, is that it was Todd Blanch, the current acting AG, that was leading the Epstein investigation. And quite frankly, all of the mistakes that we saw, the redactions, not protecting survivors, she continues to push that back onto the acting AG, Todd Blanch, who, by the way, was Donald Trump's former personal lawyer.
Now, after the hearing wrapped, Bondi shot back on social media saying that was not true, and instead she praised Blanch's Herculean efforts and also had kind words for his current performance as acting Attorney General. Now, she's the 13th witness that the committee has interviewed so far in its investigation into the Epstein case. Now, it does appear, though, they are turning their sights to Blanch and potentially FBI Director Kash Patel to have them come in and answer questions. But as you noted, because this happened behind closed doors, it was not recorded, it was not broadcast, we really have to wait until the committee releases that transcript to know exactly what she said. I also want to address those photos of her that you showed. She has a bandage across her neck. She is currently receiving treatment for thyroid cancer, and she tells me she had surgery just a few weeks ago.
Here's why that matters for her specifically, and not just the men she's naming. Bondi was the one who stood in front of cameras and hyped this. She was the one who created the public expectation. She was the one who said there was a list. If it now turns out, through testimony, through leaked details, through what survivors and their lawyers are reportedly telling members of Congress directly, that the redactions and disappearances happened on watches she was overseeing, then I defer to Blanch, stop sounding like an explanation, and start sounding like an admission that she knew things were being buried and let it happen anyway. And the internet has noticed. Social media has been lighting up since the moment lawmakers walked out of that room repeating Bondi's own line back at her. "The client list is on my desk," next to screenshots of her now saying someone else was managing the whole thing. Clips are circulating. Commentary channels, political accounts, even some mainstream coverage are all asking the same question in different words. If Bondi didn't do anything wrong, why does every new detail that comes out point further away from her instead of toward answers? Because that's the pattern here. Every time she talks, we get another name to chase. Ask Blanch, ask Patel, ask Clayton. Never her, never the department she runs. Survivors are reportedly texting members of Congress directly, saying the names are already in the files, demanding to know why no one is being charged. That is not a talking point. That is real people who lived through trafficking and abuse, watching the Attorney General of the United States treat their case like a hot potato she is desperate to hand off before it burns her. And here's the part that should worry Bondi more than anything else. Committees don't do 13 closed-door interviews. This was reportedly the 13th. And then just stop. They build a record. If that record shows Bondi had knowledge of the redactions, had knowledge of missing documents, had knowledge that survivor statements naming abusers were being scrubbed before they hit her desk, and did nothing, or worse, helped manage the cover story, that is not just a political problem anymore. That is potentially obstruction. That is potentially a legal exposure question, not just a public relations one. And once Congress starts pulling Blanch and Patel in to testify next, every answer they give either backs up Bondi's version or blows a hole right through it. She's already trying to get ahead of it. After the interview leaked, Bondi went on social media to say the reporting on her comments wasn't accurate, and reportedly praised Blanch's, in her words, Herculean effort. That is a strange thing to say about the man you just told Congress was actually running the operation you're now being blamed for. You don't throw someone under the bus in a closed-door interview and then publicly call their work heroic unless you're worried about what happens if he decides to tell his own version of events. So watch what happens next. Watch whether Blanch's testimony matches hers. Watch whether Kash Patel's FBI can explain, on record, why survivor statements were redacted before the Justice Department even saw them. And watch whether Bondi keeps getting to hide behind "I deferred" and "I wasn't managing that," or whether the documents, the timeline, and the survivor's own accounts start closing in on the one name she keeps trying to keep out of the sentence. Pam Bondi wants this story to be about everyone except Pam Bondi, Todd Blanch, Kash Patel, Jay Clayton, anyone but the person who stood at that podium and made the promise in the first place. But promises come with receipts, and right now the receipts are starting to pile up in a direction she cannot control. If the documents show she knew, if the timeline shows she signed off, there is no deflection big enough to make that disappear. Subscribe, because when this committee starts calling in Blanch and Patel, we are going to be the ones breaking down exactly what they say and exactly how it lines up, or doesn't, with the story Pam Bondi is telling right now.